Okay, with that, we're going to proceed. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We have a village team here to provide some information and hopefully answer some common questions about the aquatics facility referendum that the Wanakee Village Board is putting to voters on November 8th. That's the magic date. If there's anything you walk away with tonight, it is to make sure you vote on November 8th to tell us what you think. My name is Todd Schmidt. I'm Wanakee's village administrator. I'll let the members of our team here introduce themselves as well. Renee, you're top of my screen. How about you first?
Hi, everyone. I am Renee Meinholz, the finance director for the village.
Jared?
I'm Jared Hine. I'm the deputy administrator and communications manager for the village.
George?
Hey, good evening. I'm George Dinas with Councilman Hunsaker, and I'm with the swimming pool consulting firm that's been assisting the village through this process.
Sue?
Hi, I'm Sue McDade, Community Services Director for the Village of Wanakee.
And Tim.
Good evening, everybody. Tim Semin, the Village Community Development Director.
All right. Thank you, team. Glad you're all here and to help us through our presentation tonight. If you could go to the next slide, Sue. Our goal today is really to help you as residents, as voters, be fully informed about the choice that you're being asked to make. And the question, as you'll see it written specifically on the ballot, is shown here on this slide. Should the village construct a public outdoor aquatics facility with an estimated construction cost of $9.4 million? That is the question that you're asked to provide your vote on. Here we clarify what a yes vote means and what a no vote means. And it's pretty straightforward. Yes means you support the construction of such a facility, and a no means you do not support it. I want to take a moment to talk about something that is that can be confusing about this referendum versus other types. The state of Wisconsin affords communities two types of questions to be asked of voters on a referendum, and there's state law that dictates those types of questions which must be which are binding. In other words, strictly directs the action as a result, or those that are advisory. And an advisory referendum, which this one is, does not force the village board to do one thing or another. Rather, I guess the best way for me to put it, it advises the board on how the community feels about the questions that is posed. I kind of think about this as a big giant survey that helps the village board make a decision on behalf of the village voters. The village board realized that the November, the November election, generally during a gubernatorial election, has a very high turnout. Around 80+% of eligible voters in Wanakee generally vote during this election. So the board feels that we will have a really strong idea as to how the majority of the community feel one way or another on this particular question. So I wanted to clarify the difference between binding and non-binding, this one being the non-binding referendum. So with that said, let's move to the next. Who has this slide? Sue, you're going to be providing some background, I believe, on what got us here today.
Yep, I sure am. So the conversation about aquatics in the village of Wanakee is definitely not a new conversation. People for many, many years have been gathering and talking and trying to decide whether or not the village should have some kind of a public swimming pool. Most recently, in the year 2000, there was a group of people that gathered together and actually convinced the village board to put a referendum on the ballot to build an outdoor swimming pool located halfway between Wanakee and Westport. It was a great group of people who worked really, really hard to try to get their dream of a pool to happen, but unfortunately that referendum failed. Since that time, in a variety of different ways, we've been talking to the residents of Waunakee about what kinds of amenities they would like to see throughout our park system. And each time we survey the community, aquatics is something that comes up as a very important and very popular to the residents that are answering those questions. Based on the results of a comprehensive outdoor recreation plan that we completed in 2017, the village board agreed to host a listening session in 2019. More than 100 people attended that listening session, and support for aquatics in the village was very strong. From that meeting, we moved forward. We submitted an RFP. Many different firms put their hat in the ring to help us with that project, and we were just about ready to study this idea of aquatics in the village when the pandemic hit. So just like many other projects in all of our lives, this one got set aside. But more recently, in 2001, as things kind of got back to normal, we went back to the village board and said, what do you think? Maybe it's time to start talking about aquatics again. We researched firms that might be able to help us, and became acquainted with a firm called Councilman Hunsaker. They are a national firm that talks about aquatics exclusively. And we brought them on board to help us learn a little bit more about what might be the best thing for the village as far as aquatics is concerned. So now we're going to share the screen with George, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that process.
Yes, good evening. Again, George Dinas with Councilman Hunsaker, and we actually started working with the village just about a year ago, and really were brought on to help the village determine, the viability of either an indoor, an outdoor, or a combination indoor-outdoor aquatic facility within the village. And so we looked at a variety of things that you can see. If you can switch to the next slide, please. We have actually 3 different options that we explored throughout the study process. We had community input, meetings in person. We had a large stakeholder group that helped to give feedback. We also launched a community survey at the time. And really, we ended up studying those 3 separate facilities, whether it's an all outdoor there on the left and all indoor on the right side, or the hybrid there in the middle. We looked at not only the total size of the pools, but also the support spaces, looked at the capacity that each facility would offer, the different functions and types of programs that they would offer, as well as the site requirements for each facility. And then you can see there the capital cost as well. And then on the next slide, we also took it a step further and not only looked at the capital cost for each of the facilities, but then looked at the number of users on an annual basis that each of the facilities would see. And then we generated revenue and expense budgets for all 3 of those options. And as we move through the process, we looked at the cost recovery rate, indoor aquatics, historically subsidized, outdoor aquatics, historically can get closer to sustainability. And so that's where these numbers fell as well. And so the decision was made to go ahead and move forward with exploring that outdoor aquatic facility in a little more detail. And so on the next slide, we have a couple of the specifics about the outdoor aquatic facility. And this is, as it says, they're not the final design. This is conceptual in nature, but it's meant to convey the different types of spaces that would be included in an outdoor aquatic facility. Having a multi-purpose, multi-generational, multi-use recreational pool, that'll could have a children's area, some water slide towers, some lounge areas, and then coupled with a lap pool, that could have a water slide. It would have open recreational area. It would be a great pool to host swim lessons and water fitness classes, as well as maybe a summer swim team, and then the necessary support spaces. And we have some example imagery on the next slide as to what each of those looks like, from a swim meet in the top left to recreational swim in the top right. And so, again, these are the spaces that we would see being included within the outdoor aquatic facility.
Thanks, George. So now I'll kind of get into a little more detail about the finances. So we took the information that the estimates that Councilman Hunsaker came up with in terms of the capital costs, the operating costs, and we had our financial consultant plug those figures in and do some projections on what it would cost to the taxpayers. So the capital costs, again, were 9.4 million for the outdoor facility. So we would finance that through a borrowing. And so it would likely be a borrowing over a 20-year period, and there would be interest attached to that. So we'd be making the principal and interest payments over a number of years. And then we took the operating cost figures, the expenditures, minus the revenues that the pool would generate, leaves that 12% that the village would subsidize through tax levy. And that when we ran those figures through our estimates, it generated a tax impact of $44 per each $100,000 of assessed property value. So the average home in Waunakee for 2022 is just under 377,000. So the impact on that household would be $166 per year.
If we could just pause real quick, I want to add a little bit of context, because I've heard in the community some what is a misunderstanding regarding the difference between operating costs and capital costs. I've heard the claim made that the village has intentionally not included the interest on our borrowing in our operating cost estimate that you see here. And I'll be clear, that's because the capital cost, the principal borrowed and the interest on that principal is not technically an operating cost. Operating references the annual operations to make the facility work. We did not ignore the cost of interest. It is included in the capital cost estimate. Renee did run figures to estimate interest on a borrowing, and that amount is absolutely included in the $44 per 100,000 for property tax impact. So I want to make that really clear. Renee, is there anything you'd care to add to help clarify that information for folks who might misunderstand that?
No, I think you did a good job there, but yes, it's definitely was part of the estimates to get to the total figure of $44 includes all of those pieces all together.
All right, thank you.
So again, Tim Semen, the Community Development Director for the village. One of the things we haven't talked about yet is where might this facility go? And I can tell you right now, a specific site has not been chosen. However, we did at the staff level look at some potential areas where a facility could be located. This map that you're currently seeing represents a first effort at some, again, general areas. You see these big kind of orange blotches on the periphery of the village of potential sites. But what we did after creating this map and sort of this real broad level of analysis is look at specific criteria. And so what you're seeing on the screen right now is a result of that criteria. And one of the goals or objectives of this facility is that it be on village-owned property. And the purpose of that, of course, would be to help lessen the cost. Obviously, land would not have to be purchased. So that was one of the criteria in creating this map. What you see are a series of parcels. The red parcels are village-owned properties, however, are encumbered with limiting factors such as environmental features or stormwater. They're already stormwater facilities, etc. So they would not be candidates for this facility. However, they meet that criteria of village-owned. The green parcels are sites that are of a size, 5 acres or more, that could accommodate a facility, some of which already have facilities on them, as you can see, for example, Rip Park is just as an example. If a facility were to be located in there, it may be the case that existing facilities may have to be moved to accommodate. But again, a site hasn't been chosen. But again, in trying to decide a location, we just tried to put in some objective criteria. So the green sites represent possible sites where this may go. And then in addition, we looked at a potential future sites, and you can see there's some blue triangles. And the origin of those comes from our comprehensive plan, in which those areas are designated for future residential development. And within those future residential areas, there is likely to be some parkland dedicated to the village to obviously provide recreation to residents. And it could be the case that some of those lands within those areas, those residential areas, could accommodate a facility. Again, since many of those lands aren't even in the village yet, it's just an educated guess, if you will, that meets that criteria for a potential site that could be owned by the village. And then I think there's another marker in there, an orange one. There's a future park within the Heritage Hills subdivision that's been identified in the preliminary plat, but that has not yet been developed. That is, again, another potential site. So again, just the takeaway, we've done some objective criteria looking where potential sites are, but a specific site for the facility has not been chosen yet.
I think I'd add to Tim's comment is, to be honest, I would say we wish we could have put forward to all of you voters, that perfect location, right? I'm looking at my team here, and I think we all wish we had that. It certainly would have made elements of explaining the project that much easier. We would have been able to conform a design to the geographic elements and constraints of a certain site. But that perfect spot just simply did not come forward to us in our initial analysis. And there's some things that are just, there's elements of the village's growth that are we're right on the wings of here, we're on the edges of, that could have a bearing on the best possible location. So the timing just wasn't perfect, but I'll say that doesn't change how important this vote is to help the village board take next steps. And I guess I would say this: if we complete the referendum vote on November 8th, and there's a resounding answer to the question that our residents very much so desire an outdoor aquatics facility in the village. Let's say it's 70-30, yes. What I would speculate is that message then delivered to the village board would instigate the village board to direct us, your staff team here, to dive deeper into details about the sites and even pursue some of these with more vigor. I could see this vote informing them to help us pursue and actually narrow down this map even better. Now, that's not going to be easy. Assessing the different sites is going to be complicated. It'll be time-taking. It'll be expensive with engineering involvement as well. So I think it's a reasonable approach for the village board to ask this question at this point to help them narrow our focus. So I wanted to toss in that kind of that explanation of why we're a bit disappointed. This will still help inform us very well on the board. Does anybody else want to chime on that? I know the question of, boy, I wish we had a site to talk about specifically has come up in the public, and some have said that it may, because there's not a specific site selected, it may sway a voter one way or another. Does anybody else have perspective on that? No, I did good enough. Stop talking, Todd. I get it. All right. And that brings us towards the tail end here. I do want to pause for a moment though and talk about the resources that the village has made available. We have a website. There's the website on the screen. And Jared, why don't you talk about the work that we've put into addressing many of the questions that we've already heard from the community, or maybe not even heard yet?
Yep. So if you go to www.wanakee.com/aquatics, it takes you here to this landing page. And then off to the left, on the left-hand column, we have all sorts of tabs here. The facility options, the referendum question itself, the site selections, all the things we covered tonight. But you do see a frequently asked questions tab there. So if you go to this, you can see that we did our best to try and anticipate as many of the questions that we could, that we feel certainly that the public has already expressed an interest in, or that we think they really should know. So you can see here, we talk about what the difference is between advisory referendum versus a binding one in the first question. And then we get into some of the cost and the operational, what's all built into the price tag essentially. And then just some of the more specifics about how it will be run, how it will be funded. So like, will there be a fee to use the pool, seasonal pass? It's a picture of the design or not, things of that nature. So we tried to anticipate there. This is a living document. So as we see more questions come up, whether it's online or in public meetings, or such as this, or at a board meeting, or just online, if we see questions come up or questions that are directed to us otherwise, we will update this as we go. We've already made some changes to it to address some of those questions that we did not anticipate. And so, yeah, this is really the best resource that we have. This has all the information that we presented tonight and then some for the folks at home who want to read on their own time to learn more about it.
All right, thanks, Jared. So now I want to pause. I know we had some technical challenges at the start of our meeting, and we had unfortunately it caused limited participation. If there is anybody in attendance who does want to ask a question, there's a button on your screen that says raise hand. If you click raise hand, I'll be able to bring you in and you can ask your question. I'll add to my staff team here, after we hear a question from an attendee, let's also be prepared. If there's a common question that you've heard that hasn't been asked, let's take just a couple extra moments to attempt to answer that common question as well. So pick your favorite FAQ that we'll try to answer live here. So I have Terry Peterson and Bob Harvey with their hand up. I'm going to allow you to talk right now. If you unmute yourself, we'll be able to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I've not read those questions. I wasn't aware they were on that website. My question is for Renee on the financial part. The capital expense is 9.4 right now, which is the borrowing and the interest. But given the state of all the increases in interest and what's going on now, have you put the inflation in this, or is this figures from 2021?
So maybe George can speak to the how they came up with the original 9.4. I do believe he did attach some inflation in there. The interest rate that the consultants used, this was calculated in March of 2022, and I did confirm with our consultants that rates have increased about 100 basis points since then, which is a 1 percentage point increase from what our estimates were. So we have not, because of the timing of getting the referendum question on the ballot and things, we have not rerun any numbers since that time. but obviously interest rates have gone up since March.
And we did incorporate an escalation factor within our budget last fall. And then we also have contingency budget as well that we included in that.
The other question I have is on the operating costs. Does this include the regular maintenance, I assume, is in there, but what about repairs? This is for 20 years and we know that, things are going to have to be replaced and things are going to break, that kind of stuff. Is that included in this operating cost?
Correct. We have a repair and maintenance budget on an annual basis. And then what a lot of, municipalities will do will be to have a deferred maintenance fund as well. But we have a pretty healthy repair and maintenance budget within the operating expenses for those exact type of repairs you were mentioning.
And then my final question on the financial part of it is, with the increased rent and stuff or interest, is the $44 per 100,000 really realistic? I support the Aquatic Center, but people who are sitting on the fence are really going to want to know, is that really what it's going to cost, or is it going to be more?
Well, I think that is a very good question. Obviously, the 9.4 in and of itself, the borrowing that we'd have to undertake is all an estimate. A lot would have to happen in terms of coming up with the final design, the final cost, bidding out the project. And I think George mentioned at the last meeting that, there's some flexibility when designing something in its final phase to make sure that we maintain a budget similar to what we've put forward.
To Terry's question, though, and it's a really good question, Terry. I was actually preparing to ask the question myself, but you beat me to it. Thank you. Renee, might it be possible, and I know on our mailers, the things we've already printed, the things we've already distributed, we obviously can't change the number 44 per 100,000. But in the materials that we can change, for example, or information on our website and on our social media, is it possible to take that 100 basis point change, factor that in, and update the available public information with how that $44 might change should that interest rate reflect 100 basis point change?
We can certainly talk to our consultants because they it's not a simple single rate over 20 years. It's obviously the way they project it out. There's varying rates. That's just the average rate that I mentioned has increased. So I can certainly talk to the consultants, see if they can rerun those numbers, and we can do a recalculation. Obviously, we don't have a ton of time before the in-person absentee voting starts, but we can certainly, I can talk to them tomorrow and see what they can do.
And Terry, what I'm going to do is cross my fingers and just hope that it's one little cell within a spreadsheet, and Renee's making faces at me, where you can put in a different number and it plays through and answers the question so simply. Regardless, we're going to attempt to provide an update with that information as best we're able. So please pay attention to our website and our social media for any updates, and we'll address that as best we can.
I have another question. I don't know have you got another raised hand?
Nope, keep going. You're doing great.
Okay, another question I have is, how many parking spaces are you allotting for this aquatic center? Because parking around these parks, many of them, it's not good.
Yeah, so I think, Sue, if you could back up a couple of slides to the capacity. We had a capacity listed on there. Actually go one more. That's it. Yep. So at that outdoor aquatics, we have a capacity of about 418 people, and that's it at one time. We could see 418 people. Typically, we would assume that there are 2.5 to 3 people per car. And so that would dictate, about 125 to 150 parking spots, somewhere in that general vicinity.
The other thing, as you are considering the location, besides the parking, is also the ability for the children in the village to be able to walk to it. So if it's too far on the external part of the city, east, west, north, or south, that becomes an issue that doesn't make it usable for a number of children who might walk, because, there are junior high and high school kids that are definitely home during the summer when the parents are working. And even some of your 5th and 6th graders, your intermediate, could walk as a group to a swimming pool. And so I hope that will be considered when you're looking at location. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, ooh, the village park is fairly central, but the parking is not the best. And I don't, we've also got our village activity center there. So you've got parking there, and they're lots of times on the roads if they're really busy. So I can see the parking and the location, once it's approved, could become really important things to be considering.
Yeah, that's a really astute question, Terry. It's a type of question that we have attempted to grapple with since the start of our work. And I will assure you, if that central site had become apparent to us early on in the process, we would be having a very different conversation now that dialed straight into that perfect location. So we do entirely understand that location will be, in terms of access, being that we can't plop it right in the center, we'll have those who have easier access versus others. That is an understanding, and it's simply a factor that will be a reality of what we finally decide. Very astute question. You're talking, I mean, it's like you could be on our staff team, because it's the same stuff that we have been toying with and wishing for as well.
How was your response to your first meeting on October 3rd? Did you have more people?
We had, there were probably 10 or a dozen folks from the community. Is that right? Is that a good estimate? And I will say that public information meeting was a part of our regular village board meeting, which is recorded and available on YouTube. In fact, Jared, if you could go and grab that YouTube link and paste it in for anyone to see. And if we don't have it on our website, I would like to have that link placed so people can watch the very first one. It was right at the very start of the meeting too, Terry. So if you go to that link, you can actually watch the entire first PIM, public information meeting, and hear the questions that were raised. There were a number of good questions, some of which were brought up today already, that were addressed during that PIM meeting.
Is your general feeling still that people are supporting it? With the economy the way it is and the inflation makes me concerned. And I've been here and seen it defeated in those other times. And
yeah, I bet if you were to ask all of us that question who have heard comments from the public, we would tell you we've heard people on both sides of the fence. There's that link that Jared put in the actually, Jared, you'll have to switch it to send to everyone so that Terry and Bob can see it. Let's see, where was I? What was I talking about, you guys?
you were talking about
how people
What
were
we've
feeling.
heard.
I've heard both sides, and talking to a few village board members, they've also heard people on both sides. I'm gonna hold my breath and wait to see what November 8th tells us.
Well, thank you for all the work you've done. It's very obvious that work has been put into it, and it seems like every time it has come up, it's progressed further. So that's a good thing.
We appreciate that, Terry. Thank you to you and Bob for joining us today.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so team, I gave you the challenge. What's your favorite frequently asked question and answer? Who wants to go first? Sue, go for it.
I think the question that was asked at the village board meeting earlier in the month was a really good question. One of the citizens asked about affordability and the importance of making this kind of a facility available to all of our residents. And as George and his team put together the operational budget for this facility, they did a deep dive into comparable facilities in our area, what it costs to swim at other facilities in nearby towns, Middleton and Sun Prairie, Cross Plains. They also looked at the cost of other entertainment kind of things you might attend, the cost of a movie, or the cost to do something else with your family. So our fees are set twofold. One, to make sure that we cover the operation costs of our facility, and we're conscious about that. But two, to also make it affordable to all of the families throughout the village. And then I would add another layer onto that. And that is, as with any programs and activities that we offer here at the Community Services Department, we have some processes in place to help those families that, even though the fees are as reasonable as they can be, maybe they still can't afford that. And we are ready and able to make sure that we can help those people as well. And so we truly want to offer a facility to our community that everyone can be a part of and can enjoy.
Thanks, Sue. Who wants to go next with their favorite? Jared, go ahead.
So one of the questions or one of the topics I've seen come up and heard about is about staffing. And what, because we all know how hard it is to get staffing right now, and sort of what the plan is to make sure that we can address that. Because I think some of the concerns that I've seen have been, okay, they support the facility, let's build it, but now how do we make sure we're going to be able to staff it? So I don't know, is that, Sue, would that be a you question?
Oh, Sue in the hot seat today.
There you go. Well, it is definitely a conversation that we are very aware of. But staffing is not unique, I think, to just aquatics facilities. One of the things that we talked about again at the last village board meeting is working in cooperation with the indoor swimming pool at the school. They are already gearing up to try to add more aquatic staff to our community, not only for this potential facility, but also just for their very own. So we will be doing everything that we can to get ready for a new facility that needs new staff.
Renee, George, or Tim, do you have an FAQ that you'd want to jump in on?
Yes, I can jump in on one. There's a question that asked about future phase, consideration for a future phase or future phases or expansion. Since I was involved in the investigation of sites, I think Terry brought this up with her question about parking. Is there are several factors that go into where a site may be located. One of them, if the village board decides to move forward, is that question of has a future phase or expansion been taken into consideration? So I think that speaks to the complexity of if the village residents are going to spend the money, what about the future? And so that I guess is something that struck me. So I think that's going to go into obviously part of the calculus if the referendum moves forward.
Yeah, I think for me, we get questions regarding, what types of programs could an outdoor aquatic facility, offer. And it's not only recreational swimming, but, you take the lap pool, for instance, that we've shown, we could see that being, from 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning, it's summer swim team. And then from 8:30 to 11, a quadrant of the pool is being used for different shallow water aerobics classes. And, a quadrant of the deep water is being used for 15 to 20 participants in a deep water aerobics class. And you have one lap lane open to the public, and you have 2 swim lessons, 2 lanes for swimming lessons, where you have, 4 children at each end, and so that lap pool is really versatile in what it can offer, and then during the afternoon, there's a couple of lap lanes set up for the community, and the rest is, recreational swimming. And so that's one of the questions that we often get, is the versatility of a lap pool and how it can offer, something for everyone in the community.
All right, thanks, George. Renee, was there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I really think Terry hit on a lot of the financial questions that have been asked and are addressed in our FAQs. And we've, we'll continue to try and look at those numbers and see if we can get some more current information out to people. But, we had to work with the numbers we had at the time. So we understand people asking those questions, and things have changed drastically just in the past couple of months.
And with that said, even now, what's to say what situation we'll be in at the moment we press the button to borrow money? That's a tricky one, and one of those questions that really we can't give a firm, perfect answer on for those who are making who are trying to make their decisions. So that is a tricky challenge, but we are hoping that we can provide it the best, most accurate information as possible to help all the voters along. Are there any closing thoughts from the group here, from the team on the screen? Nope. If not, then I'll note that we will, this is being recorded, we will post it. And if anybody watching this recording has questions that we haven't addressed, we would ask that you right away reach out to us so we can get that question answered. Do we have any additional slides, Sue, with where to go for more questions?
Nope, this is the last slide.
Okay.
Wanakee.com/aquatics is definitely the page where everything that we have been working on for months and months is posted. Great links there. Jared keeps that updated on a regular basis. So that's the best spot.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you again, everybody, for participating. It was good to have you join us. And we, again, will be very happy to answer any other questions you might have as we make our way towards November 8th. And finally, the one thing to remember, let us know what you think on November 8th. All right, good night, everyone.